We're about to move to a very special part of our World Food Day. Some of you have heard in the past of the social gastronomy movement. It was born out of the vision and values and culture of a group of chefs in Brazil. They were looking at everything at food waste to just hunger in the favelas, and they began developing a way of thinking about food as solution. And that social gastronomy movement grew out from there to be a whole wide global movement. And that global movement is taking the lead in many, many countries over the next 3 days. So today, tomorrow, and Sunday, with big ambitions globally, delivering 1 million meals and many other things. We have coordinated our timing with them to live stream their kickoff, their opening of their 3 days of events. You can see on the screen a list of the presenters. We will be going to their live stream to catch their first part of their program. We'll hear from many different countries, exciting solutions. And again, it fits our focus of the day. We want to make sure we have the facts and the big picture about food security and insecurity, what's causing it, what are the different characteristics of what we need to do to turn this around. But we'll also be highlighting and celebrating the solutions that people have been developing in their own communities, in their neighborhoods, in the countryside, for their whole regions. This is a theme for us here at Global Minnesota, which is that we have the solutions within our grasp, but we need to make sure that the solutions that are important in the short term in hunger must be addressed immediately. And I think Governor Beasley from the World Food Program really highlighted this, and the Nobel Committee, when they honored World Food Program with the Nobel Prize, talked about the urgency of addressing hunger. But what we know is that in all things, we must think of the solutions for the 7 generations, for the future. Yes, we have things that we must do today to protect ourselves in the pandemic, whether that's vaccination and mask and all of the things. But we know we must also take appropriate steps to strengthen our public health system. We need to make sure there's food on the table. Yes, of course, but we also need to make sure that our fishing practices and how we produce and how we process and deliver food meets those criteria, those standards of reducing waste, of reducing carbon emissions, of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So as we head into a future conscious of the challenges created by conflict, by the climate crisis, by the COVID pandemic, we go into that future knowing that we have the solutions and they can be simultaneously putting food on the table and dealing with the underlying causes of conflict, the underlying causes of this climate crisis, the underlying weakness in our public health system that made us vulnerable to this pandemic and its destructive effects on our economy. So we're thrilled to join Social Gastronomy live at their kickoff. Thank you again for being with us here today.
So we usually have a harvest moment, which we will do in the chat right now. So anything that struck you, that inspired you, someone amazing you've met in your little group, please share actively in the chat, because right now the hour has hit and we're actually going live. So I'll welcome everyone that's actually joining us through the live stream on YouTube. We are cross-broadcasting. We're cross-broadcasting with Global Minnesota World Food Day Symposium. So there are a bunch of people joining us through the live stream just now. So welcome everyone that's joining us at this hour. Charles, to kick off our main dialogue, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Nikki, and welcome everyone to this exciting universal table where we are going to have an opportunity to hear from some extraordinary guests who are joining us from different time zones and different locations around the world. Over this time, we're going to have 2 conversations We've asked our guests in advance. Nikki and I've had conversations with all of them to invite them to respond to a question that relates to what they've learned about themselves in the context of creating connections, collaborations, and partnerships. So we're going to explore that together in conversation. And then we're going to transition into a conversation around possibility in this time of COVID, conflict, and climate change. What are the possibilities that our guests are seeing? So we're going to engage our guests in sharing a little bit at the outset. We'll evolve that into a bit of a dialogue with each other. Nikki and I will be asking questions, and our greatest sense of excitement and hope here is that amongst the guests who are joining us, they're going to discover overlaps of intersection and interest and possibility, and that all of you who are joining and observing this will hear some ideas, some inspiration that will help build on the incredible work that we know that so many of you are doing in this space of using food as a tool for social change. So a delight to be here on this on the Universal Table as part of the overall summit. And I think, Nikki, we're going to start by brief introductions of our guests.
Yes, so I'll kick us off. I'm really excited to welcome Carina Nilsson, who's the mayor of Malmo in Sweden. Carina actually hosted us exactly 2 years ago in Malmo, where we had our last in-person social gastronomy movement summit, and we had a beautiful moment at the City Hall, learning so much more about this great city. Quite frankly, it really impressed me because it's so inclusive, so diverse, and it celebrates its diversity, and also has received many awards for its sustainable development and much more. So do check out Malmo. If you're ever in Sweden, you must pass by the south.
And we learned that Carina makes amazing rhubarb cookies. So our next guest, I'm sure for many people there's been hardships with COVID, and for many of you, I hope there have also been some silver linings. I know a silver lining for me was meeting a new neighbor, Charles McNeill, who, as you see on the slide, is the Senior Policy Advisor for Forest and Climate at the UN Environment Program. It turns out that Charles used to live and spend a lot of his time in New York City, but he now lives very close to me on a place called Bowen Island here in British Columbia, and absolutely thrilled to be getting to know Charles. The list of his achievements, involvement, and presentations in topics related to climate change, Indigenous peoples initiatives. I mean, the list is so long. It's extraordinary. And Charles, I'm just so happy that you're here and able to join us this morning. And the one thing I want to share with everyone about Charles is he went vegetarian in the 70s and has been a devout vegan for 15 years. And his honoring of plants is something that I have so much admiration for. So welcome, Charles.
Our next table guest of today is Mariana Vasconcelos. She is a Brazilian entrepreneur and the founder of AgroSmart, and is also one of our wonderful social gastronomy movement community members. Where do I start? Well, being the daughter of farmers, she knows the farmers' struggles really well on the ground, and now uses technology to better agriculture and really connect for a more resilient and climate resilient specifically as well, agro sector. She's Forbes 30 under 30, MIT innovator, she's a web tech pioneer, and many more. So really happy to have Mariana at the table as well. And I do remember, on a personal note, as we're on both, actually during the Rio Olympics, my very first panel in Portuguese, I was sitting next to this wonderful woman that would from time to time do little translations into English for me. So I'll definitely never forget that moment. Welcome, Mariana.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Mariana, good morning. Another of our special guests joining us at the table this morning is Michelle Grogg. As you can see, she's Vice President and Corporate Responsibility and Executive Director at the Cargill Foundation. What I learned in my conversation with Michelle, I met her for the first time last week, is her passion for food security nutrition and sustainability. And if you read her bio, that's evidenced by her involvement in so many different organizations having to do with water, having to do with sustainability, and just really quite extraordinary. And Michelle, I just want to do a special call out to your organization, to Cargill, who has been behind the social gastronomy movement and been so supportive ever since the beginning. So welcome and thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks, Charles.
Wonderful. Now we're going to move all the way to Nepal. So I've got as one of our late at night guests, just like from Korea, we have even someone joining. Tulsi Giri. Tulsi is the co-creator of a association food network. So how do we go from food chains to food networks? It's all about net weaving. He's also a social entrepreneur in many other areas like Bazaar, where he connects farmers and consumers directly, breaking those silos. And I really want to make a special shout out today because we're honored to actually have Tulsi, because it's evening for him. And right now it's the Dashain in Nepal, one of the biggest festives, and goes on for 2 weeks. And today is a very special moment for him because it's a celebration of victory of good over evil, and actually a time for family reunions, exchange gifts and blessings. So I hope you find gifts and blessings in our session today, Tulsi, as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Again, welcome to all of you. And in just a moment, we're going to begin our conversation together. But before we do that, I'd like to take just—
Charles, we're missing two table guests.
Who are we missing?
Oh. Maureen and Mauricio.
Oh, Maureen, my apologies. Oh, I'm jumping too quickly to Maureen. Oh, how could I forget? Maureen, welcome, joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm so sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Maureen is the founder of Tule Vyema, and if you go to the website, which I did a few days ago, it has got to be one of the most inspirational set of images of young people engaged in growing food, and it's reflective of Maureen's extraordinary commitment to the elimination of malnutrition and teaching of nutrition. It's just, I have a big garden, but boy, when I look at some of what Maureen's doing in the city with vertical gardens, it's just extraordinary. The other thing about Maureen is she was recently the youth voice at the United Nations Food Summit. And her energy and her passion are so infectious. And I'm just so grateful that Maureen's here with us. Welcome, Maureen.
And last but not least, and I think that Charles, I must have drilled too much. We're going to be on time. We have to be on time. So I'm sorry for putting the pressure on that.
No.
Last but not least, I would like to introduce Mauricio Rodes, who's a former mayor of Quito. And nowadays, I'm not even going to list everything that he does, because I don't know how he does it with sleeping and taking care of his family as well. But he's in countless city and climate initiatives across the globe. And Mauricio and I go many years back, actually. We did meet at the World Economic Forum. And I have to say, on a personal note, I was really inspired because Mauricio was working outside of the country, outside of Ecuador, living abroad, and then he developed a responsible government model, and decided to go back to his country, and actually ran for president, became the mayor of Quito, so really committed to advancing his country, his city. And so I'm really excited that you're joining us in our dialogue today, running between commitments. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for the invitation. It is great to be here in this great space for discussing how gastronomy can become a driver for social change and improving people's lives. So thank you so much. During my time as mayor of Quito, I have the opportunity to working with different initiatives regarding gastronomy in the city, including an urban garden program that I will be talking about later on today. So thank you so much. Great to be here.
Thanks, Mauricio. Now, Charles, you can kick us off.
Now we'll move into where we're going next. I just, again, thank you to our guests, our special table guests, and I'm looking forward to this next hour, roughly, that we're going to have together to explore and to think together on behalf of how we advance our individual and our collective work in influencing change in so many different ways around the world. You'll see on the slide right now, we call it our recipe for food systems transformation, and the three elements that are so core to the efforts and the work of the social gastronomy movement. It's all about connection and how do we create connection. We invited people who arrived a little bit early to this gathering to gather in small groups to connect with each other around food rituals. And we consistently try and create these opportunities for connection, because through those connections, oftentimes the opportunity for identifying what might we do together, where's the potential for some collaboration, what things we could do that we simply couldn't do alone arise. And from collaboration, we've watched partnerships emerge amongst and between people in the 80 plus countries that are now part of the social gastronomy movement. So connection, collaboration, and partnership is at the heart of the recipe behind the social gastronomy movement. And we've invited our guests to reflect on their own experience and to share a story of connection, collaboration, or partnership, with a particular consideration to a second model I just want to reference and acknowledge, and that is a recognition that all change begins with ourselves. We can talk about large-scale systems change, we can talk about societal change, but regardless of the scale or the nature of change, it all begins with me. So our invitation to our guests this morning is to share a story, and we've asked them to each take about 2 or 3 minutes to share a story of an experience of connection, an experience of collaboration that may have led to a partnership. And what have they learned about themselves in the context of that work? And we're gonna hear from each of our guests in the same, close to the same order. I'll be calling on them. And after we hear each of their stories, Nikki and I are going to weave together some of the themes that we're hearing, but we will also invite you as the guests around this table together, if there's something that you heard that really struck you, that you want to build on or link to after we hear the stories from each of you, let's turn this into as much of a dinner or breakfast or lunch roundtable as we possibly can. So I'm going to start with Charles, just because you happen to be geographically closest to me, and ask you to share your story of connection, collaboration, or partnership, and what you've learned about yourself in the journeys you've been on.
Great. Well, thank you. What an honor and a pleasure to be with people from all over the world. And my story relates to something I think that each of us can understand, and that's the impact on climate change that we've seen all over the world, the floods, the droughts, the fires, the hurricanes, the extreme weather, extreme temperatures. We only need to look outside our windows now for evidence that climate change is an existential threat. And here in British Columbia, Canada, a little town just a few hours north of here, Lytton, registered the highest temperature in the history of this country of Canada just a few months ago. And then tragically, a few days later, it burned to the ground due to a wildfire. We're seeing this everywhere. And we're experiencing it. No one's safe. No one is going to get away from this until we solve it anywhere. So, and it so happens that recent reports confirm that there's just no way to avoid catastrophic climate change without protecting tropical forests, the Amazon, the Congo Basin, the forests of Asia, where many of the people participating now are. So it's also true that a major driver of tropical deforestation is agriculture, particularly animal agriculture. 80% of the deforestation in the Amazon is due to the cattle industry for beef. So clearly one of the best things we can do for climate is to stop eating beef, among other things. But to address this issue, in 2008, I helped create a program called the UN RED program, Reducing Deforestation and Forest Degradation in Developing Countries. And at the time, it was a wild idea. Now it's a $400 million program operating in 65 countries. And the lesson in connection, collaboration, and partnership for me is that when we created the governance structure that would oversee this program, we managed to ensure that Indigenous peoples had the same rights and responsibilities as entire governments and as UN agencies, that Indigenous peoples had full seats on the governing board. They had veto power to stop projects and investments that they considered detrimental. And we achieved this by appealing to the humanity and the heart of the high-level government officials who had to make that decision. We didn't deal with them as bureaucrats and automatons, that we asked them to step outside of what had been standard practice for probably generations. And it turned out to be something of an historic breakthrough because this hadn't been done in multinational programs that I'd ever seen. Indigenous peoples' power and authority was recognized to be equal to that of governments and agencies. So this allowed Indigenous peoples to be constructive co-creators of the programs to protect their forests rather than, as has often been the case, excluding them from the process so they could only be heard by their demonstrations and protests on the streets outside. So instead of being opponents of the program from the outside, they became leaders from the inside. And what did I learn about myself? It sounds maybe sort of trite, but I learned that we should never limit ourselves or censor ourselves just because something has never been done before. I recall standing in front of this group of high-level representatives of governments from all over the world to propose this. And I was sort of terrified, thinking this is for sure going to be thrown out, never possibly accepted. But I just went for it anyway. And I learned that even if I think something's impossible, it's worth really, really going for it. We need to dare to think beyond what we know or can even imagine. That's what my lesson was.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Charles. Super example of you actually have no idea what's possible until you try, and limiting or censoring yourself is only going to lower the potential or possibility. I'm going to just because of the potential links that I hear here, Maureen. I'm going to go to you next. Just because of what Charles just closed with in terms of aspiring to possibilities that you may not have previously imagined, and invite you to share your story of connection, collaboration, partnership, and what you've learned. Maureen.
Wow, thank you, Charles. It was really great, and I kept nodding when listening to Charles when you were speaking, and that's really inspiring. So for me, I would say is growing up and seeing caregivers make decisions or make hard decisions of who of their children is going to eat. This did not sit right with me because I am a firm believer of everyone has access to food and no one chooses where they should be born. So this is actually what led me into studying nutrition at bachelor's degree level, so that I could be able to be equipped with the technical knowledge of how to eradicate or address malnutrition from a technical point of view. Eradication with the meaning or reduction of malnutrition cases and food insecurity. So while in school, I realized the knowledge that I'm getting, actually, I'm sharing it with my family members. But remember, non-communicable diseases are on the rise. This is actually not just a Kenyan or an African problem, but this is a global problem. 1 in 3 people are malnourished. Yesterday, I was talking to one of a health worker, and they were telling me at the health facility, they're actually seeing more incidence rates of children suffering from overnutrition as opposed to undernutrition. So I thought to myself, how do I change this narrative? How do I share the knowledge that I am getting far and beyond my family members? That is how Tule Vyema was born. And so what Tule Vyema does, and Tule Vyema is actually a Swahili word for let's eat right. Tule is eat, Vyema is right. So Tule Vyema raises awareness of proper feeding habits among community members. We mainly work with young women of reproductive age, because in the Kenyan culture or in the African culture, a woman is the one who is in charge of her kitchen. So once the woman appreciates various nutrients that she's supposed to be feeding her family, the various types of food that she should be feeding her family, and why these types of or varieties of foods are important, she's going to replicate this. And also to bring this the lessons that we share in class and to make them more practical is we equip these young women of reproductive age to cultivate indigenous vegetables on kitchen gardens. Why indigenous vegetables is one, as a way of promoting our culture. Even as urbanization happens and takes place, the rapid urbanization, we still have roots where we belong. And also these indigenous vegetables are more nutritious. They're more nutrient dense as opposed to the exotic vegetables. So the women cultivate 4 varieties of these indigenous vegetables for their household consumption, and then they sell the surplus to meet other household needs. What I have been able to learn throughout this journey is, one, we all have important ideas. There is nothing too small, regardless of where you sit. You always have something to share, and you always have something to learn from the other person. And the ability or the courage to keep going and action what you think, what really annoys, action what you have identified as a challenge in maybe like society, and just get going. Sometimes you don't have all the answers, but just start. You'll figure out, you'll meet very supportive people along the way, people whom you can be able to engage and then share ideas, and you'll be there. So I would say that is a nutshell.
Maureen, thank you. Begin the walk and others will join you. Have the courage. You know, and I think given your passion for nutrition and addressing malnutrition, Michelle, you're kind of in the middle of my screen, and that topic I think is one that's is so core for you. So maybe we'll go to you next for your story.
Sure, happy to. So I love this notion of connection, collaboration, and partnership. It is what we do at Cargill every day in terms of our role in the supply chain, connecting farmers to markets and customers to key ingredients, but it's also what we do in our communities. So how do we connect across and within our communities? And a lot of our work, as you're pointing out, Charles, is around improving access to food, making sure that we can nourish the world. We know that to achieve a more sustainable food system, it requires participation from all the sectors. So many of the people who are around this table today, we have to collaborate, we have to partner. We talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and believe that SDG 17 is actually the most important. We have to have partnerships to achieve all the rest. And so that's very much where we come from and how we're focused. So this notion of connection, collaboration, and partnership is part of what we do every day. And I'm lucky to work with a team of people who develop partnerships around the world to advance food security and nutrition, improve equity, strengthen livelihoods. One example that I wanted to talk about is some of the work that we've done with CARE over the years, and that's really to put women at the heart of many of the investments that we're making. So whether we are funding savings and loan programs for women in India, or helping cocoa farmers improve their yields and incomes, or working with women in Central America to help provide alternative income sources. All of these are impactful investments that result in improving food security. Women are more likely to invest those dollars back into their families. Kids are going to school, we're seeing families better nourished, and we're seeing stronger communities. And so through these kinds of partnerships, we've learned a few things. One, I think trust. We have to have trust as a foundation for these partnerships. We have to believe and agree that we are all working toward the same goals. We may agree to disagree, but we have to have trust and faith that we can work through those challenges. That's one. Two, I think one of the big lessons learned is that we have to have a long-term commitment. These are big changes that we're trying to make, and so it doesn't happen in a year. So Cargill often makes 3-5-year commitments to our partnerships. And in cases like work that we've done with the World Food Program, our partnership spans more than 20 years. The work that we've done with CARE spans more than 60 years. These are long-term partnerships, long-term investments that we're making in terms of resources, but also building the relationships that we need to drive real change. And then back to Charles's point about innovation and a willingness to take risks. I remember not too long ago sitting around a table talking about this idea of the social gastronomy movement. How could we connect people across the world who share this view that we can improve food security, and we can connect food with social justice. And here we are today, sitting around a virtual table, all connected, based on an idea that that happened just a few years ago. And then we've been able to connect that work right here in our hometown community. I'm sitting in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Global Minnesota is helping to broadcast this important conversation as part of our World Food Day activities. And we can highlight great organizations like Appetite for Change, who are doing incredible work here to link food and social justice. So learnings, trust, commitment, and the willingness to innovate and take risks are some of the key learnings that we've had. So great to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And clearly there's some themes that are emerging here in terms of making those commitments, building trust, and exploring over time. I'm going to go from there. Tulsi, let's jump to Nepal and hear a little of your story.
Yes, namaste everyone again. I would like to connect the story to what Maureen just said before. When you start and when you keep going, you'll find lots of people around you to support, and you can just then keep on going. It was back in 2002. I started becoming social entrepreneur as a young guy wanting to do something in food and agriculture and starting organic business, which I realized at the moment it was too early for our city to start organic shop, first in the town. And it was a hard job. And already first year, we were all like going down as a business, you know. So I decided to go back because I was starting in Switzerland before, and then I decided to go back to Switzerland. But then luckily I met Patrick Honauer, who is one of the co-founders of Social Gastronomy Movement as well. And we built up this friendship together. And I came back to Nepal and restarted what we are doing. And I'm still continuing all those initiatives. And not only one initiative now, like multiple initiatives, and getting connected to all these lovely people in SGM, you know, being around the globe, learning. And it's like, then we started working together. So it was like the connection was there, and it started becoming collaborations with multiple people's, multiple friends from around the globe. And then the partnership built up. And not like we are trying to create, like we discuss a lot about like what is food and how we could work with entrepreneurs working around food. And I love the term actors in the food, like who produce, who sell, who process the food, you know, all the actions in the ground, who are doing the hard job for the food to come to the plate, you know. So our dream is if we could build up a society where food becomes a collaborative commons and not, you know, so if it becomes the asset of commons, then nobody would go hungry, nobody would fight for food, or it would be a beautiful society. So because of the connection and collaborations, the journey is directed towards that, and we're still moving on, and hopefully it will be, we'll reach there someday all together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tulsi. As I listen to you, I have this image of planting many seeds and many flowers grow. And I've heard the stories from Patrick of the work that you're doing in Nepal with many others, planting many seeds and the many flowers that are growing. Let's, on that note, maybe move to Mariana, and Mariana, hear your story.
I feel excited that me and Tulsi, we share that vision and technology and agriculture. I'm excited for the post-panel conversations and see how we can partner and generate impact. So I think that's the sense of those dialogues, right? I decided to tell a story that has a lot to do with this moment, and also on how we can do something small. Like there's many ways to create partnerships that will change the whole world, but there's also ways to act local. Brazil suffered a lot with the COVID crisis, and especially Manaus, that is the city capital of the state of the Amazonas, where the Amazon forest is located, suffered a lot with the lack of oxygen. So a lot of people died and the whole city collapsed. And at that moment, I was very worried on how could we help. We do have a subsidiary of my company in the region. And it's like, we are not doctors. We don't understand about oxygen, just have no idea how to help. So we started looking what else was the consequences of the lack of the oxygen in those chaos. And it turned out that there was a huge poverty, like a lot of people lost their jobs. They were not being able to access food. And a lot of farmers were not able to sell their produce anymore. So we partnered with a local startup that what they did is like to intermediate the transactions between farmers and markets. So they use it to help farmers to sell their produce to the city fairs and consumers. And with them, we bought the produce from the farmers and donated to the families that could not afford it. So we end up in less than 2 weeks helping 2,000 families to alleviate a little bit of the suffering of lack of access to food and support financially the smallholder farmers in the region. And I think what I learned from it is like that there is always something you can do. You just have to look for it. Like maybe you don't have the expertise, you don't know. And it doesn't have to be big, because like myself before that, I'm always looking something to be the moonshot, exponential and great. And it's like, and then sometimes you end up not doing stuff because you just think they're not big enough. And I think like we have to act and help, even if just a small help.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Again, this theme of the power of connections and collaboration that occurs and what's possible when people come together that you may not have seen at the outset. So let's go, Mauricio. You can hear your story about connection, collaboration, partnership, and what you've learned about yourself. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Charles. So I would like to talk about an initiative that we developed during my time as mayor of Quito. So we developed an urban garden program, which meant the possibility of interacting with different stakeholders. It was really an initiative about sharing responsibilities and partnership building, basically. So the reason we decided to foster this program was because on the one hand, we wanted to address the issue of poverty alleviation by providing low-income families the opportunity to grow food in their homes and then sell those products through a very well-established chain of distribution. We also were addressing issues regarding gender, because 85% of people, working on these urban gardens were women. We were, of course, also addressing the issue of mitigation and adaptation regarding climate change. And we will also addressing issues regarding food security. So, this is the kind of initiatives through which you can establish a very positive scheme of partnerships. We learn a lot. I personally learn from very inspiring stories from people working on these urban gardens. I remember a woman named Elma, who talked to me about how she was growing avocados in her garden, and previously her family didn't like avocados. But then when she started growing avocados with organic methodologies, then they realized the healthy and nutrition very positive aspects of avocados, and then her family became a big fan of avocados. right? So that's a kind of very nice and interesting anecdotes you get from working with people on the ground, in this case from City Hall, but supporting an initiative that was community driven, like the Urban Garden Program. So that's my story.
Mauricio, thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge, and again, a common theme, the power of the stories, your own story, but the story of other people and what they're doing. It's beautiful. Carina.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor for me and the city of Malmo to be part of this really. And I want to share a story when I was chairman for the Environmental Committee 2005, and I listened to a representative from Fair Trade City who has been in South America at the banana plantation, and she talked about that, and I get very affected of that telling. So after that, 2006, we was the first fair trade city in Sweden, and we worked on with that. We have a food policy going 10 years from 2010 to 2020. And in this year, we have really done a lot. I want to share some examples, but I think what I learned is that you, as a politician, you have to make some policies, you have to set up goals, and you have to check them, ask for them. What is the result to keep the interest? And you have to really do a long time commitment. And we work together with NGOs and also business and entrepreneurs. But in this food program, we have, for example, in the school, we have found out a new word. We call it foodology. I don't know if it exists, but 13 to 15 years old pupil in their schedule discuss every week about food. And that's all aspects from the cultural, from the farming, for food waste, ethical questions, and food safety and so on. So they are really have a focus on food and the climate, of course, what we do with the climate and what the impact the food has. And then we also have a special program supporting the entrepreneurs, for example, about food safety, packaging, and make climate smart products, and also urban planting farming. So we support people who want to really live on urban farming in a small size, but still that you can earn some money and live on it. So we have a lot of examples, and for now for example, in Sweden, the children get free lunch in school. So we served every day 50,000 lunches in the city of Malmo to children. And we have 100% ecological vegetables in that. So we have reached the goal we set up, actually, reach it before the schedule also. So, and we also work with the SDGs, more sustainable, yes, you know, the UN goal. So we had that as a structure for our whole budget working. So yeah, that was a little from but I think we need also politicians who take these policies and really check up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Carina, and thank you for all that you've done in support of the SGM, the Social Gastronomy Movement as well, hosting the summit that happened there 2 years ago. I know that your leadership is absolutely instrumental in so much of what's happening, and as you've said, it's only possible through the engagement of others as well. So it's beautiful to be watching. I don't know if you sitting at the table have also been watching the chat as well as listening to those who are sitting here. It's beautiful to see some of what folks are saying. And I want to acknowledge that we have two audiences. We have those who are here on Zoom and are putting in their chat. And then we have Global Minnesota, who may not see the chat, but just want to call out and acknowledge that people are shouting out to our table guests what they appreciate about the importance of touching hearts, about the importance of building trust, recognizing that no step is too small, especially when you begin, because others will join you and come along. So we're hearing many things in the chat. But what I'd like to do, and Mariana, you sort of set the tone by saying, oh, I can't wait to have the conversation with the other people here at this table. I'd like us to try and imagine that we are sitting around a table together. You've all heard each other's stories, each other's challenges, each other's actions, your own learnings. And I'd like to open it to anyone who would like to ask a question or reflect on or make a comment in response to anything you've heard from the others. And you can just unmute yourself and jump in. Charles.
Maybe I have a question for Maureen. Such a touching and inspiring story of the impact of local foods and taking care of each other. I'm just wondering, Maureen, how can you connect your work with the broader international community? Is there any way that those of us around the world can help you in the kind of work you're doing at the local level?
Wow, thanks. Charles, thank you so much for that question. So yes, one of the ways of supporting or connecting with Tule Vyema, we are currently available on all social media platforms. That means Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you're also free to perhaps further this conversation via also email. I'll drop the email address on the chat box and also our social media platforms. And also another way would be just to interact with the content that we share. We frequently ask, like we post the indigenous vegetables that our women cultivate. We would like to hear, are these vegetables perhaps available? Maybe, yeah, they could be indigenous, but also could there be a variety that is similar to that in your country? And yes, but I'm happy to have a further conversation on that. Thank you.
Others, questions of each other or comments or anything you'd like to elaborate on? Tulsi.
I just wanted to add what Carina, did I mention it? Okay. What you just told about the school nutrition, we had the initiative in 2019, we were trying to start like a school meal initiative. And for us, it was so hard to convince the school and the government bodies, the municipality, and all those people who are important in that sector. Like we work with farmers, we have lots of food, and the idea was just to connect those food with the school canteens, and it was like tough. And then COVID came, we had to stop that initiative at the moment, but we are trying to initiate. But what I wanted to reiterate is, it is not just only the entrepreneurs or initiatives that could bring in, but also the policymakers need to come on the same table, and then it is easy. I have faced that challenge, and thank you for serving 50,000 meals each day there for the kids. I would love to do that soon.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Tulsi. Carina, did you want to comment at all on that?
No, yeah. Maybe it's special for Sweden that we have that free lunch, but of course there is brave politicians history who have decided this, but it's also depending today from different municipalities what you said do about these lunches. because you can, of course, very cheap food and not good, but we can also put a lot of effort in it and learn the children to eat vegetables and try new recipes and so they get something with them from this meal.
Michelle?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on. I mean, this notion about school-based nutrition is so important, and I think we see it in places like Sweden where you're really leading the way. There's a lot of conversation in the United States even around universal school meals. To your point, Tulsi, how do we connect farmers to those markets? It's a great market, especially for smallholder farmers, and we're doing that work as well with the World Food Program in parts of Central America, where we're able to connect farmers with schools. And so I think for this group, just to think about where can we create more of those connections. It's a great economic opportunity, and it's meeting a need that is just so significant for students. We need them fed so that they're able to learn. A great call out.
Beautiful. Mariana.
In Brazil, a lot of cities, the schools provide, the public schools provide free meals for the kids, and they source from family farmers. So like in many places, it's already the protocol. There is a lot to improve in terms of nutrition, like actually have planned meals after they buy it, how do they use it, what they use as protein and so on. Like there's a lot to improve. But there is this, and then when they suspended the classes in COVID, that's what triggered like the complications for the smallholder farmers all over the country. And in that line, since we have like two representatives of the public sector, I also want to understand in their vision how like companies like mine that provide technology for creating climate resilience and farmers, how can we connect to the civil society in the case of the UNEP and the government to support those challenges?
Mariana, I just want to build on your question and direct it to Mauricio and Carina. Charles started by sharing his story of appealing to humanity and heart of governments, and that it was by connecting to their hearts that the shifts were made. If we might circle back to find out what you did, Charles, in that particular situation. But Mauricio, I'd be really curious to hear, building on Mariana's question, when these connections and potential collaborations are found kind of in the community, in the field, what role can government play in helping move those to more impactful, broad partnerships? The role of government and how to appeal to the hearts and humanity of government. So Mauricio, and then maybe Carina, we could hear from you as well.
Well, I think that city governments are in a unique position to do that because they are the closest level of government to the people, right? So local authorities understand daily needs from the community. And probably because of that, they are the most fit to undertake proper solutions to improve people's lives. Now, I have a big concern about what's going on right now because cities obviously have been at the forefront of dealing with COVID-19. Once again, cities have been at the forefront of dealing with one of the most global pressing issues, in this case, a pandemic. Just like we have seen cities doing so with climate change, with migration, and some other very, very pressing issues. Now, the question here is, are cities capable of undertaking this kind of challenges? If, for example, they don't have proper access to financing. Unfortunately, in many countries of the world, cities are not allowed to internationally borrowing. In some other, many countries, cities need a national government's guarantee to access to international finance, a national government guarantee that might not be granted because of political rivalries between the national government and the local authority. And this is important because if we think about cities as the closest, or local governments as the closest level of government to address daily people's needs, they frequently are not able to do so because of this kind of obstacles to receive the necessary financial resources to undertake initiatives to effectively tackle climate change, to build resilience capabilities, to face with challenges like COVID-19 and others. So that's why partnership building is so important. That's why, you know, it is important to have these kind of spaces to discuss about ways in which we can improve people's lives at the local level by here thinking that gastronomy can become an industry for partnership building, for fostering different kind of economic activities, job creation in cities, but also the access of cities to finance these kind of initiatives, not only at the national, but also at the international level.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mauricio.
You know, following up on that theme, if I could, I've always believed that the cities is where the battle to save the planet or not is going to be won or lost, and that mayors are incredibly important. That most of the economic, you know, activity of the world happens there at the local level. And so I'm just wondering for Carina and also from Mauricio, you've done things in those cities that other cities have not. You've taken a risk, you've swung out, you've stepped up. And I just wonder, how is it that you found the courage and the support to do that? Because most don't. So what is it that allowed you to kind of have that impact, to really be innovative? You're unusual. And what's your secret?
Thank you. And I agree with Mauricio that the city level often take initiative and is in the front line with climate work, for example. And in Malmo, we are a city with 350,000 inhabitants coming from 182 different nationalities. So we are a really multicultural city, and half of the population is under 35 years. So we are also a very young city. And I really think we get courage from our citizens and try to have a good dialogue in different ways. But we also in Sweden have the system that we in the city local level can take taxes. So we of course have an opportunity to finance in another way than other cities that get all their money from the national level.
And Mauricio, for you, to Charles's question, the source of courage to act comes from?
It must come from under, I think.
Yeah, I think that, you know, as much as you can engage the community in the decision-making process in a city, the better, right? And you can do that through various ways. Something that we implemented here in Quito was participatory budgeting process. So we actually heard communities' ideas about how the money would be spent for community works and you know, local infrastructure developing. And not only that resembled people's needs, but also it was a very interesting vehicle to encourage people's participation. And I think that, again, you know, as much as you can have that kind of participation will always be positive and important. Going back to the example of the urban garden program, you know, sharing knowledge, ideas, and initiatives among that community was very meaningful. We learned a lot. I mean, as local authorities, but also people working on the actual program also learned a lot, and they improved their ways of, you know, channeling the distribution of their products. They raised their income by doing so. So again, you know, having an open channel for community engagement and the provision of ideas and input will always be very, very important.
I want to just build on this a little bit and bring in a comment from one of our observers, Mark Series. He's written, it requires the collaboration of not only governments, but of farmers, businesses, industries, NGOs, and individuals. And Nikki's comment prior to that is, and it needs a foundation of trust. And Michelle, you touched on this topic of the importance of building trust. Would really be curious to hear from you a little. What are you learning about what it takes to build that trust? Certainly you shared in your opening comments that commitment to the long term is key, but what else?
Well, I think, in addition to a long-term commitment, you have to be really willing to listen, right? So we have to come to the table as true partners and equals when we're trying to develop new programs and partnerships to drive change. And so for me, yes, it's about trust, but we have to be able to listen to each other. We have to be able to adapt and bring in others that we're going to learn from. We don't have all the answers. We know a lot, but we don't know it all. And I think part of creating successful partnerships that lead change is that you bring in the right people to do the right work. So we're going to need local governments, right? We're going to need farmers. We're going to need NGOs to come in with their expertise. And so I think it's about really looking holistically at challenges before us and who has the right skills and resources to drive that change.
Beautiful. The right people coming together to listen deeply with and to each other to discover where those intersections of possibility might be. I'm going to shift the conversation in just a moment into the possibility space, but I'd like to, Maureen, I saw that you unmuted yourself for a moment there. Just if there are any other comments around themes that have been emerging that you've been hearing at this table, Maureen.
Yes, I just wanted to add on to what Michelle has said and say also involving like the community members or whoever the stakeholders involved in identifying the challenge. Sometimes what I perceive as a challenge may not necessarily be what the community think. The community could think, or other stakeholders could think that's like a secondary challenge. So also as you involve them in implementation, also identification of the challenge is vital in involving the relevant stakeholders. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah. Charles, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, just, in that example of me presenting to a bunch of high-level government officials, I think what was important was to remember that they're human beings above all, beneath it all, that we need to not be intimidated by titles and just sort of be careful and rigorous about addressing ourselves to the human being there and not to the office or the all of that. And somehow that's hard to do in political affairs, but it works sometimes when we do that.
And Charles, just build on that a little bit. Is there anything in particular? I mean, Michelle's offered, listening is absolutely key. Is there anything you've found in your work and working with officials in those positions that has helped connect at that shared humanity and heart level? Anything by way of a practice or a way of being?
It's a really good question. I think it's just sort of reminding myself that this is a person who was born and grows up and lives just like every single one of us, that his and her concerns are just the same fundamental concerns that we all have about caring for our family and our loved ones and aspiration for a future, that whatever political constraints they're under, that beneath all of that, there is that same aspiration for a whole new world that we all share, and just to keep that in mind as I'm engaging with them.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to shift us in this last 15 minutes that we have together into the second part of our conversation, which is, an acknowledgement of, kind of think of it as the 3 C's that we face, and they've been mentioned here in this conversation. Certainly climate change is a challenge, conflict, some more so in different locations than others, but certainly conflict, and the challenges of COVID. So, we could look at these 3 C's, climate change, conflict, and COVID, as problems and challenges or difficulties. Our invitation to you in coming to this table was to think about what is a possibility that is compelling and engaging your heart right now, that you see in this space of social gastronomy in the context of climate, conflict, or COVID. What's a possibility that's compelling or exciting that you're engaged in or see? And maybe we'll start with Mariana and go around, just go around the table, and then to Carina, and then to Charles, and we'll go from there. Mariana.
Oh, let's try. Well, I think it's a great moment that we're living, and with all the COVID challenge that we had, we were posted with a great opportunity of restarting, right? Like, there's many campaigns from global compacts from the UN and so on that like, we cannot just go back. We have to go back differently. And the pandemic raised the awareness around food, because many people just became aware in the beginning when everything was missing in the supermarkets and so on. And like the worries were around, we cannot lack food. We already have health issues. We cannot have food issues. So like I saw an awareness, a shared awareness among the several stakeholders on thinking about the food supply chain. So I think that created a momentum for us to discuss about the climate crisis and so on. And I think the way that we change the food system and make it more resilient to the climate crisis, it starts with the consumer and the food that we have in our table. So when we make conscious choices, when we push brands, retailers, food and beverage industries into our trading like Cargill, into bringing to us consumers more traceability, more transparency, then that creates a domino effect, because they have to go back to their supply chain and they have to support farmers into building that production model that will allow them for having data, that will allow them to communicate to the consumers. And then you can tackle all at once, like yield increase that we need in order to feed more people, climate resilience, and traceability.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mariana. Carina, a possibility that you see?
Yeah, it's maybe not about food, but I think the pandemic has had no good things. But one thing I could see, and that's that we have taken the step over the doorstep to the digital meeting world as we do now. We can meeting without traveling, and I think that's very good for the climate. So that's a good, the technique I think have been there for a long time, but it has been some resistance, so we don't use it like we could. But now we have a lot of meeting digital, and we found out it works very well. And for myself, I also sit with my iPad on the table and eat together with people in other parts of Sweden through FaceTime, for example. So you can really enjoy these digital possibilities, and that I think we have to thank COVID a little for that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carina. And Carina, I don't know if you'll have the time, but please join one of the Universal Kitchens. It's incredible, some of the folks that are going to be, the chefs that are going to be sharing and cooking and eating together. Talk about possibility, made possible by technology. Charles, possibility that is exciting or compelling to you right now?
I have several. One is, we saw during COVID that when governments choose to prioritize something, they can allocate enormous resources immediately. When governments feel political pressure, they can take serious action. So they can take serious action on climate if they feel that political will, and that's one message. Secondly, that there's, as Mariana said, there's an opportunity to build back better. This is the time to accelerate the long overdue phasing out of fossil fuels for a resilient and low carbon economy. This is the time, and I'm really encouraged to see growth in plant-based foods. So people are understanding that to eat more plants and less meat is critical for their health, for ethics, and for forests and the climate. That I'm seeing and encouraging. And the last thing is I'm seeing a kind of historic potential for reconciliation between religious leaders and indigenous leaders. In my work with the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, I'm seeing the potential for healing where religious leaders, starting with Pope Francis, are literally apologizing to indigenous peoples for 500 years of oppression and suppression, and indigenous peoples are generously responding to that. This new alliance offers a whole new hope for protecting the tropical forests and the indigenous people's rights around the world.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charles. I'm going to go Tulsi, then Michelle, then Mauricio, and then Maureen. Tulsi, possibility that excites you.
Yes. I would like to tell my own story that we went through these 2 years. You know, before COVID, I had 6 initiatives simultaneously. Some were starting, some were already in a kind of phase. But then COVID, and they were all towards like tackling the climate change as an issue in a bigger topic. But then COVID came in, and then the first lockdown, we had to shut down everything. So we were like all confused, not sure what to do. But fortunately, you know, ever in my life as an entrepreneur, with our digital Kheti digital platform that we have connecting farmers and the market, I made the biggest money during this pandemic time. And that was like, for an entrepreneur, it was a great thing, you know, like the customers were responding positively, and they were like buying local food with us digitally. And our farmers were happy because they could like even sell during the pandemic. And that was a lovely, like as an entrepreneur, it was like doing great. So tech thing, it works even with pandemic or challenges. There is a solution we can all work out. Second thing, you know, like we were planning for Nepal food as a big event, like yearly event as fair and summit. But then this again, COVID break it down. We couldn't do that. But after having the digital presence and after like being engaged, like we say like, okay, let's do something. Like we are part of the UN Food System Summit. So let's do the virtual dialogue. And it's amazing. Now our farmers are using our platform and they're part in the digital meetings. Our farmers are attending the, come on, like in Nepal, they can, like farmers can use the technology and be in the same table to discuss, which was like, everyone thought it is too much, like farmers can't use the technology. That's wrong. Now it's proven. So, and then this virtual network of like Nepal food grew now, like last week we did like first physical event with Universal Plate with SGM. And it went fantastic. And the new collaborations initiated. And now like we had like network of more than 300 initiatives from around the country who are in the pool of our like network of Nepal food. We have the platform completely best running. So the challenges can become opportunities and it's possibilities and it's going on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tulsi. Michelle.
Sure. Well, I just want to highlight the resilience in people that we've seen. It's been remarkable. And so we talk about this notion of building back better, and I fully agree, Charles and Mariana, with some of the things that you both said. We do need to build back better, and I think there was a great reset. People are looking at what are the priorities? What do we want to focus on? Where do I find more meaning and impact in the work that I'm doing? And we're certainly seeing that. I think people at Cargill are working harder than ever to make sure that we get food where it's needed. This important focus on farmers, and Maureen, you talked about making sure we've got community members and in the conversation to help direct it. Same with farmers. We talk a lot about the changes that need to happen in agriculture and food, and there's not always farmers at the table. And so one of the things we really prioritize at Cargill is how do we make sure we have those voices there? They are the environmental stewards. We're seeing remarkable change and innovation in agriculture, and farmers are leading the way through regenerative agricultural practices. And so I think that's really exciting. On the community level too, we talked about the role of cities. I mean, the amazing resilience of our cities and our communities to respond to COVID, to respond to climate, I think gives us a lot of hope. We've seen great agility, great adaptability, and amazing collaboration. We're seeing people partner who haven't before. We just experienced, significant impact from Hurricane Ida to Cargill's facilities in New Orleans and to many of our employees. And we had one of our nonprofit partners who works on river cleanups go down, donate generators to food banks to make sure that people could access to food. So creating these connections and a real willingness to help one another, I think, is one of the great outcomes of this, and certainly gives me a lot of hope.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Mauricio, possibility that's compelling to you at the moment?
Well, I think, yeah, like Michelle just mentioned, cities have shown extraordinary leadership around the world by taking very innovative and bold decisions, in many cases, even more so than national governments, to protect the population from COVID-related risks. And they have been doing so also regarding other kinds of threats. You know, we've seen cities like Athens facing the challenge of forest fires because of extreme heat during the summer. We've seen cities in the west coast of the US and in Canada during the summer also experiencing very high temperatures, and therefore, you know, local authorities taking bold decisions and initiatives to protect their population, particularly the most vulnerable from heat-related risks. So cities are perfect spaces for innovation. And in that regard, I think that cities can become really a driver. And I really think this is a great opportunity. Cities can become a driver for the Building Back Better strategy all over the world. I would like to see cities, for example, receiving some of the financial resources that are being part of the recovery packages that are being set up by national governments. We have seen multi-trillion-dollar recovery packages being set up in many countries around the world. Okay, I think it is time to disperse some of that money into cities so cities can implement climate change related projects, can build resilience capabilities, can foster different industries for economic growth and job creation, like, for example, the gastronomy, the social gastronomy sector. So that's the kind of opportunities I see now. And again, having the chance of speaking about this in these spaces, it is very, very relevant in order to come up with ideas and innovative solutions for this to happen.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. Maureen, we'll end with your comment on what you see as possible.
What I see as possible is COVID-19 has clearly, just as Mariana has said, it has exposed the fragility of our food systems. But what really excites me is during the UN Food Systems Summit, there's a youth coalition that came together, and we wrote, it's a youth pledge that calls for governments and businesses and private sector to listen to young people and the ideas that they have towards building back a stronger food systems, and also not only a pledge, because that's the pledge part of the campaign, but also actions for change. What are some of the actions of change young people in the different countries that we all come from? What would you like to see your government commit more towards? And that's what really gives me that's what I see as a possibility, because currently we have over 103,000 pledges from all over the world. And this is a campaign that was launched on the 18th of May. So with that we launched it in May, and we are now in October, and we've been able to gather over 103,000 signatures. It shows that young people are committed towards building a stronger food systems. Governments, business, private sector, we are calling on to all those people to be able to support, because as Carina also mentioned, that they have a very youthful population, and if it is to be, it is definitely up to us. And yes, so that is what really excites me. And the campaign is called Act for Food, Act for Change, which I highly recommend all of you to be a part of. We say it's a youth pledge, but we're an all-inclusive team. So you do not have to be below 30 years. You can also pledge as an ally. And I encourage you to share it with your networks, because together we can do this.
Oh, Maureen, thank you so much. Wow. Wow. We're at our time, and I want to keep going. I want to go have food with each of you and explore these, but I just want to, in summary, three things. Say a huge thank you to the six of you for being here. Two things have really struck me. The power of the collective. And I'm thinking of, and I'm going to change Margaret Mead's famous quote just a little bit. Never doubt that a small group of committed farmers, youth, chefs, government leaders, and NGOs can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And the second thing that has struck me is the power of the heart. And Charles, you started us off with that acknowledgement that we're all connected. And I am going to close us with a poem that comes from an Indigenous leader here in Canada. Some of the folks in the social gastronomy movement know this. It's a reading out of a lovely book by Richard Wagamasi called Embers. He's an Ojibwe elder, and fortunately he's passed away. Just take about a minute to read this. And I think it really touches on so many of the points. From our very first breath, we are in relationship. With that indrawn draft of air, we become joined to everything that ever was, is, and ever will be. When we exhale, we forge that relationship by virtue of the act of living. Our breath commingles with all breath, and we are all part of everything. That's the simple fact of things. We are born into a state of relationship, and our ceremonies, our rituals, and even our meetings are guides to lead us deeper into that relationship with all things. Big lesson. Relationships never end, they just change. In believing that lies the freedom to carry compassion, empathy, love, kindness, and respect into and through whatever changes. We are made more by that practice. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's absolute delight to share this time this morning with you and my fresh blueberries, which I will eat when we finish.